This is a Nightline Friday night special.
This is CBS Reports, Harvest of Shame.
He was the man behind Edward R. Murrow.
These are the forgotten people, the underprotected, the undereducated, the underclothed, the underfed.
He helped bring down Senator Joe McCarthy.
The actions of the junior senator from Wisconsin have caused alarm and dismay amongst our allies abroad and given considerable comfort to our enemies.
He helped originate the celebrity interview show.
Your picture has been on the cover of almost all popular magazines, hasn't it?
No, not the Ladies' Home Journal.
That you would like, would you?
Yes.
You may not recognize his face, but he changed the face of television forever. Tonight, remembering Fred Friendly.
From ABC News, this is Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
Whenever you watch television news at its very best, you are hearing an echo of Fred Friendly. Whenever you watch television news and find yourself sputtering in frustration, lamenting the sinking standards of the industry, that too is an echo of Fred Friendly. See how you feel about this sentiment, for example. There is, he said, a sloppy habit of permitting unnamed sources to spread undocumented attacks on a wide variety of public officials and others who have neither been formally charged nor indicted. Could have been written today, couldn't it? Except that Fred Friendly died on Tuesday and was buried today. He actually delivered that slap on the wrist to all of us back in 1989, by which time Fred was already well into his 70s and I was going to say long retired, but he never did retire. He simply took his customary practice of shaping and intimidating colleagues and students into different venues. Fred Friendly liked to quote the late Justice Potter Stewart, who once told him, "The trouble with you journalists is that you're all mixed up between what the Constitution gives you a right to publish and the right thing to do." Fred Friendly worried a lot about doing the right thing, but many of you, I'm sure, have no memory at all of who he was or what he did. He made television documentaries. To all intents and purposes, he invented the television documentary. He and the handsome, brooding correspondent with the cigarette. You may remember him, Edward R. Murrow. Friendly was the producer, Murrow was the correspondent. They took on causes together. The mistreatment of America's migrant workers, for example. They called it Harvest of Shame.
One farmer looked at this and said, "We used to own our slaves. Now we just rent them." Because a report on Senator McCarthy is by definition controversial,
they took on bullies together, as in this landmark program on the late Senator Joseph McCarthy, which ran 44 years ago next Monday. And both of them, Murrow and Friendly, were forever marked and shaped by their experiences as reporters during the Second World War. Friendly was physically injured and scarred in the China-Burma-India theater, but nothing before or later would leave as lasting an impression on him as entering the concentration camp of Mauthausen in Austria. He was a war correspondent, a sergeant in the U.S. Army, accompanying troops liberating the camp in 1945.
As we approached, I remember the combination of the smell of petrol, gasoline from our vehicles, and the stench of human flesh. Although I'd never smelled human flesh in that abundance. And there was this death factory. And I saw more bodies, but there were thousands of them. And they were piled up like cords of wood. Above my eye, above anybody's eye. They were just piled up like cords of wood. Emaciated, thin, stinking bodies. The next 12 hours were sickening. You tried to keep, for lack of a better word, a stiff upper lip, because you knew how much it meant to those who were still alive. My memory is that 175,000 human beings died at Mauthausen in ovens, but there was still some in those barracks. And when we walked into the barracks, there were bunks 4 high. I would say no wider than that, like 28 inches, maybe 3 feet. Pine wood. And in each of those bunks, there were 3 or 4 corpses that were still alive. Or, put it another way, human flesh which was about to expire. And as we walked in, 3 and 4 in each of these and 4 high, they clapped. Not at me, but at the American liberators. And I still hear that sound because it reminded, there was so little flesh on their hands.
Friendly wrote to his mother that night about this experience, a letter that has been read at every family Passover since.
I walked 3 countless cell blocks filled with sick, dying people. 300 in a room, twice the size of our living room at home. And as we walked in, there was a ripple of applause and then an inspiring burst of applause and cheers. The men who could not stand up sat and whispered, thanking us. Though they tried to shout it, they whispered, Viva l'Amerikansky, Viva l'Amerikansky. The applause, the cheers, those faces of men with legs the size and shape of rope, with ulcerated bodies, weeping with a kind of joy that you and I will never know, I hope. Viva l'Amerikansky. I got a cousin in Milwaukee. We thought you guys would never come. Viva l'Amerikansky. Applause, gaunt, hopeless faces, at last filled with hope. One younger man asked me something in Polish, which I could not understand, but I did detect, I thought, the word yit. I asked an interpreter what he said. The interpreter blushed and finally said, he wants to know if you're a Jew. When I smiled and stuck out my mitt and said yes, he was unable to speak or show the feeling that was in his heart. That, my dear mother, was Mauthausen. So it was sort of my emancipation. I was a Jew and I'd be that for the rest of my life. And that was my baptism there in the blood and smell of a prison camp. We have to take care to preserve those pictures in my head, those images in my eyes and in my gut that I saw have to be preserved. And I don't, as much as I believe in television, I really don't believe by television. I think it's by people who can bear personal witness to that. And I really don't know how to. My generation is running out. It's like a vaccination. It no longer takes. I'm not going to live more than 10 years or so, I hope. The reason I'm so anxious to do this dialogue is because I owe it to those people at Mauthausen to preserve that which they were forced to endure. To the extent that I let that fade from my soul, I am denying them the eternity to which that dirtiest trick in the history of the world, Holocaust. They deserve me and others like me to go out like town criers saying, this happened with my eyes, with my nostrils, with my ears. I bear witness to this.